Ground Zero Lounge. I'm Clyde Lewis. Let's hear it loud for the internet out there at ideocast.com. Thank you to Bill Coons tonight. He's videotaping the show tonight, so give him a big hand. It'll be on YouTube or on Google soon, so it's going to be great. And it's the perfect show for him to Google tonight, I must say. I want to let you all know that when I prepared this show, and I'm not kidding you, I actually got a panic attack. This show is going to be, I'm going to warn you now, this show is probably going to, I mean, it's Halloween, right? So when Halloween happens, you got to get a little spooked. Well, this is more than spooky. This is a number of psychological spooks that you're going to be dealing with tonight. Mainly about, we've talked about global warming. We've talked about the global economy falling apart. We've talked about the governments falling apart. And tonight, a little bit about, I think, what we're going to talk about is the alien threat, or the manufactured alien threat, for those of you that don't know what's going on, and we're going to go into detail a little bit about this show. But before we get into some detail here about what's going on, I want to remind everybody that coming up this Friday, right when I finish with this show, I'm going to karaoke my daylights, and then I'm going to go home and I'm going to work on 2012 force structuring the new Eon, which is going to be performed at the ESO Zone Seminar. It's going to be going on at the Watershed at 6380 Southwest Capitol Highway. We'd like to see all of you in attendance. I'm going to be speaking Friday night. I'm also going to make an appearance on Alex Ansari's show. That's going to be coming outside of the box, and that's going to be happening on Thursday night. So tune in. It's on, I think, channel 23 or 22, one of those public access channels. So I'll be appearing on that show, talking about what's going on. Then we move from there to Friday night. We'll be speaking at ESO Zone. Both Alex and I will be there as well. I will be broadcasting live on IdeoCast at www.ideocast.com. Give them a hand for giving us this opportunity tonight to broadcast out. I'll tell you right now, the world is listening, the world is watching, because a lot of things are breaking here at the Ground Zero Lounge. Tonight is no exception. What I'm about to present for you tonight, a lot of people know about it. They surf the internet. A lot of people don't know about it. I stumbled upon this accidentally, and as I was perusing the internet and as I was presenting and going through some things, I figured my audience needs to hear this, because it has yet to make it to other shows like, Coast to Coast AM. I don't think Alex Jones would even touch this with a 10-foot pole. Maybe Jeff Rentz would touch this. But this is something that we're going to, and you're hearing it exclusively at the Ground Zero Lounge. I'm sure that there are going to be different interpretations of the data that I'm about to demonstrate for you tonight. I want to let you all know at the beginning of this show that tonight's show is going to present disturbing recordings and also disturbing footage and pictures that are pretty much right up there. They'll really make you feel kind of oogie and weird. They made me feel all oogie and weird when I was putting them together. But I think that it's important that this information gets out, and so tonight's presentation is going to be a really good presentation for everybody, I'm sure. Tonight's presentation is called EBE, codename Mona Lisa. For those of you that don't know what EBE stands for, it means extraterrestrial biological entity. And you're going to see the EBE Mona Lisa tonight. This is going to be a premiere at the Ground Zero Lounge. It's been seen on the internet, but we're going to try and ascertain whether or not this is all a hoax or whether or not it's all real. This is like prior to the alien autopsy. Everybody said, oh, alien autopsy, real, 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 and then finally they realized it was faked. But tonight, we're going to bring on some people. We're going to have some people come and speak. Actually, we have Natasha Charda here tonight, who is a mortician, who is going to come up here and speak for a little bit. And also, I think Alex Ansari, when he shows up, he has some summaries that he wants to give us. This is such an important story. So we're very glad to have you all here tonight. Let's just begin the show right now so we can all get an idea of what's going on. In 1951, one of my favorite movies of all time is A Thing from Another World. How many people have seen that movie by applause? I'm talking about not the Stephen King version. I'm talking about the Halt Who Goes There version back in 1951. RKO Motion Pictures did a wonderful job with a movie called The Thing from Another World. James R. Ness played the part of the alien. And what it was, and it was really interesting about that movie is that they wanted to talk about a UFO that was found in Antarctica. And the Air Force had said that they're not going to help them with the film because they don't want to have any part of promoting aliens and the relationship between aliens and the Air Force. So they were pretty much on their own, but if you see this graphic behind me, you see that this UFO is pretty, this is 1951, and that's pretty damn advanced special effects for a film. And also the film was made so you can actually turn the darkness or the brightness level down on your television set if you're watching it, and you can actually listen to it. It's like listening to a radio play. It's a very good film. Well, after the crew discovers this UFO, or this flying saucer in Antarctica, there happens to be this reporter who says, "This is the most amazing story in the world, people. What are we going to do? I'm going to go and I'm going to phone this in. We're going to make this happen. We're going to tell the whole world that we've discovered aliens." And the commander comes up to him and says, "You're not going to report anything." He said, "What do you mean? I've got the Constitution. I've got freedom of speech that tells me I can do this." The commander says, "No, you're not going to do this. You can't do this, because if you do it, you could basically, the information could rock the very belief systems of planet Earth. You can't tell anybody about what we found here in this Arctic outpost." And so he doesn't report it. The same goes for the television show X-Files. In the television show X-Files, Deep Throat, what happens is that Mulder sees a fantastic aircraft flying over an Idaho air base. And he wants to tell the whole world about it. He says, "I need to tell the whole world." And Deep Throat tells him, "You can't do that, because if you do it, there are a lot of lives that are in the balance, a lot of problems that can happen if you were to report you saw this exotic aircraft." And so, while they're standing there after he's run through the track and he's all sweaty, Deep Throat says to Mulder, he says, "Why is it that those like you, who believe that extraterrestrials exist, are not dissuaded by all the evidence to the contrary?" And Mulder says, "Well, because all the evidence to the contrary is not entirely dissuasive." Which means there's a lot of evidence to show that it's not there, but there's a lot of evidence to show that there are beings out there. And there are people who have belief systems, and those belief systems are very powerful. And there are people who can take those belief systems and they can actually manipulate you with those belief systems. If you fully believe in God, or if you fully believe in extraterrestrials, or if you fully believe in some strange belief system, your government and those people that want your, I guess you could say, servitude, will do anything to get you to comply. And they may even go to the extremes of, telling you there are extraterrestrials or there are aliens out there. But you see, the thing that's most interesting about science fiction is that we get to a point where the outer limits of outer space, those outer limits out there, become off limits. Now, why do you think that outer limits become off limits all of a sudden? Well, I'll tell you why. Because after the press created the flying saucer, and they did create the flying saucer, because when they talked about it, it wasn't that Kenneth Arnold, when he saw them flying over Washington, he said it kind of skipped along. The saucers kind of skipped along like a saucer on water. They coined the phrase flying saucer. The media created that. Actually, the ships that Arnold saw were nothing like flying saucers. They looked like flying bats. They looked like they had wings, okay? And which kind of makes you wonder if it was our technology that he saw. But the stories of the 1940s and 1950s of the flying saucer and the public paranoia that happened with Sputnik and all these things, there were concerns that if definitive proof of aliens exist, or if there was any proof at all that aliens existed at all, ancient civilizations, you name it, then what it would do is it would destroy all of our belief systems. It would destroy beliefs in God. It would destroy beliefs in science. In fact, in the book Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, the same scenario exists, that when the aliens finally show themselves, and when we finally have no, when we finally have no question as to whether or not they exist, religion goes away, because all people want to do is believe in aliens. And not only that, but science goes away too, because all people want to study are aliens. So we see the paradigm change the minute we finally get the truth and we find out that there's no doubt that aliens exist, that we'd have to function under a different paradigm. So what they created was the proposed studies on the implications of peaceful space activities for human affairs. They submitted that to NASA. And it says, this study might help to provide programs for meeting and adjusting to the implications of an alien discovery. Questions one might wish to answer by such studies would include, how might such information, under what circumstances, be presented or withheld from the public for what ends? What might be the role of the discovering scientists and other decision makers regarding release of this fact or discovery? This is also known to most of us as the Brookings Report. The Brookings Report was issued because what they wanted to do is they wanted to let people know that no matter what, we had to keep quiet any discoveries of ancient artifacts on the moon, Mars, and they even say in the Brookings Report that there may be things that could be found on the planet Venus. If you ever read the Brookings Report, you should get an opportunity to do so because it's very fascinating, because at this time in history, the 1950s and the 1960s, the government was very concerned about possibility of finding ancient artifacts on Mars, the moon, and Venus. And so here's an excerpt from the Brookings Report. It says, while direct contact with extraterrestrials is unlikely, evidences of its existence might also be found in artifacts left on the moon or other planets. The consequences for attitudes and values are unpredictable, but would vary profoundly in different cultures and between groups with complex societies. A crucial factor would be the nature of the communication between us and other beings. Whether or not Earth would be inspired to an all-out space effort by such discovery is moot. Societies sure of their own place in the universe have disintegrated when confronted by superior society, and others have survived even though changed. Clearly, the better we can come to understand the factors involved in responding to such crises, the better prepared we may be. In other words, they stated that if we were to find out that there was an ancient or a civilization out there in space, and if it was better than we were, it could change our very belief systems. It would change religious belief systems, government belief systems, how government is operated, how science is operated. These things were of great concern to the people of the time, because we were reaching out into the cosmos to find out more about ourselves. Now, other security documents were also discovered and talked about. One was called Project Grudge, and another was called Operation Majority, and there was also one called the Majestic 12 documents. And many people have said the Majestic 12 aren't real, but if you do some investigating, some of them are real, some aren't. Now, these documents revealed secret space programs where technology stolen from the Nazis was being used by both the Russians and the United States. Project Grudge contained the history of alien involvement with Nazi projects since 1936. Roswell does not matter because we have talked here at the Ground Zero Lounge about the Nazi saucers and how in 1936 something crashed in the Black Forest and the Nazis got a hold of it. And that there's something called the Brotherhood of the Bell and several other groups where they were trying to develop flying saucers. So really, the technology that everybody talks about that the aliens gave us wasn't given to us at all. It was actually given to the Nazis, and then we turned around and hired Nazi scientists to come over here to the United States to bring us our rocket programs and also our saucer programs. Not only that, but these pictures you see are of the Hanabu type of aircraft. If you look at it, there's saucer craft, and there are the blueprints for those. And I did a whole show about this a while ago to talk about how what I thought that a lot of the saucers that we saw in the 1940s were actually Hanabu craft that were being developed by Nazi scientists and flown over the Northwest by Boeing and several other companies and crashed at Los Alamos. Because a lot of people don't know this, but Wernher von Braun actually was at Los Alamos when the saucers crashed at Roswell. So this would make you wonder, wouldn't it, if there were really aliens on board or if those saucers crashed and there were German scientists on board. That would completely be a total security risk to let people know that Nazis were flying those flying saucers and that they crashed them at Roswell. So there you go. Now, the secret documents also demonstrated that mysteries of space were not limited to the final frontier, a question of whether or not we were alone in the universe. The mysteries were in the evil that men do in order to reach those lofty goals of touching the face of God, or to appease those who think they are gods themselves. Hitler wanted saucers made. He wanted to have ships that could take off without runways. And that's why the Hanabu craft were created. And that's why, if you look in the old German documents, you can see that new evidence can be suggested that these saucers were seen over Germany just before World War II. These are actually shots taken from Germany with these saucers in the sky, and these are not doctored. These are actually in German documents showing that the saucers were there and they were testing these craft right before World War II. Now, while the technology was still being tested, there were scientists that by war's end were ready to use this technology to go to the moon. Plans for rocket and saucer technology were transferred to the hands of both the Soviet Union and the United States. For those of you that think I'm making this up, you need to do research into something called Operation Paperclip, where we brought the German scientists over from Germany and we had them go under false visas, and most of them were war criminals. And we hired them to build our rockets, and to some people think that they also built our saucers. And that we have the technology to build the flying saucers. Technology that we actually had taken from the aliens, if you believe that. Went all the way back to 1936 in the Black Forest. Now, while the American space program claims that all of their space missions were held out in the open, the Russians reportedly were conducting both an open space program and a black ops program. The United States seemed to have a flawless record with astronaut safety. After all, we sent a man to the moon on the first try and brought him back. And it was a safe job. We got him on the moon, we brought him back, and nobody died. However, Russia was not that lucky. Russia was not that lucky. And this is where we come to a part in our show where it gets a little creepy. There's some new evidence that's coming out. I've been really fascinated with this. I speak Spanish, but I can also decipher Italian. And for some strange reason, I was roaming around European websites and I stumbled upon an Italian website, and I was able to read about these two brothers. And this is an interesting story. These two brothers were taught, and I'll get to this in a minute, these two brothers were monitoring the radio signals from Russia. And I got to looking around and doing some reading, and I found out some very interesting things about the Russian space program that kind of, I guess, it kind of convinces me to a certain degree that in '69 we never went to the moon. That we did go in '69, but we eventually found a way to get there because we had another space program, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But in the meantime, there's actually legends and mythologies out there, people who, they call them conspiracy theories for a better word, but now new evidence is suggesting differently. But there's actually a few people out there that believe that somewhere in the vast blackness of space, about 1 billion miles out there somewhere, about the first human being that went to outer space is floating out there somewhere. And he's out past the boundary of our solar system, and he's gone into interstellar space. His body has been perfectly preserved, frozen at about minus 454 degrees Fahrenheit. His tiny capsule has been silently sailing away from the Earth at 18,000 miles per hour for the last 45 years. He is the original lost cosmonaut whose rocket went up, and instead of coming back down, just kept on going. Now, this Cold War legend is being rekindled, and the possibility of secret space programs operating in both the United States and the Soviet Russia are gaining credibility because of this story that I stumbled upon with the Italian news services. And this is going to be really fascinating. This is where we're going to break it here at the Ground Zero Lounge. The idea that Soviet Russia, in their quest for space, there were two programs, and they actually had a program where you didn't see what was going on, and you didn't hear what was going on, but two brothers in Italy managed to uncover the conspiracy. There was something called the lost cosmonauts. There are at least 6 that we know of that died under unusual circumstances in Russia. And it's really a really creepy story, and since it's Halloween, since we're getting close to Halloween, I figured I'd kick off the creepiness in such an interesting and fun way. Space is a pretty creepy place. There were these two brothers. One was named Judica, let's see if I can pronounce this, Cordiglia, and his brother Gian. They had a love for radio since 1949. They were big radio ham operators, and for them it was like the internet. You know, I get on the internet and I sit there and I fiddle around, and they got on the radio and they fiddle around and find all kinds of interesting information. Well, when they heard of the first space missions in the 1950s, they decided to increase their abilities to listen to the conversations from the Russian Cosmodrome. That's where they fired off all their missiles, their Sputniks and their dogs and their Lycans and all that stuff. They fired them up from the Cosmodrome. But see, one of the things that's really interesting is that they both lived in Turin, Italy, and they were made aware that the Soviets, this was a little conspiracy theory that they heard, that the Soviets were actually sending men into space. No one had ever heard of the possibility of sending man into space. They had Sputnik about the size of a little beach ball going out there in space, and they had a little dog flying out there, but they never ever dared to send men out in space. So in the middle of the night, after getting a tip, they decided to rush in their car through the streets of Turin, and then they went and they set up these big antennas and these dishes, and they decided they were going to listen in on the conversations of the Russians as they were firing off into space. The Russian cosmonauts. The brothers finished setting up, grabbed their headsets, fiddled with the knobs on their receivers, hit the record button, and listened. And what they accidentally heard has been classified up until now. And you're going to hear some of it tonight at Ground Zero Lounge. It's going to be really creepy for you. Welcome Space Observatory in West Germany said it had intercepted radio signals, which it thought might have been a satellite. When it was discovered that the signals were being sent from an unknown source, there was a sense of panic in the observatory. No official announcement had been made. No rocket launches, nothing. It was as if something in space was out there unidentified. And at first they thought it was some sort of unidentified flying object. No one knew where it came from. But the Cordiglia brothers were listening to the exchange. They heard a series of beeps and recognized them as an SOS. Someone in a capsule was spinning out in deep space. Was it a Russian cosmonaut? They were baffled because there were no records of manned launches and absolutely no reports of manned missions. The brothers continued to scan Russian frequencies when a keel picked up a transmission from an orbiting capsule. They recorded the wheezing and struggling breathing of what they thought was a suffocating cosmonaut. The Russians were sending men in space, and they had the evidence. They also formulated the speculation that something may have harmed the capsule, but they could not prove anything hostile was in space. 2 days later, the Soviet press agency announced that Russia had sent a 7.5-ton spaceship, which had burned up during re-entry. No further information was forthcoming. The brothers were convinced that they heard the dying breaths of a cosmonaut. From May of 1960 to April of 1964, the brothers had recorded several transmissions of secret space missions where cosmonauts were sent into space and by all accounts were never heard from again. Many of these recordings were the terrified screams of cosmonauts that were buried, actually burned up in orbit or died while trying to pierce through the Van Allen belt. Go ahead.
So this is before David Bowie's Space Oddity.
Yes, David Bowie's Space Oddity, if you want to know, came out during Apollo 13. So it's kind of interesting that you're hearing about astronaut dying in space when astronauts could have died in space in our space program, and they didn't die. But they were dying, the cosmonauts were dying in the 1950s and the 1960s prior to our moon landing.
Well, the scenario just sounds really similar.
Yeah, it's exactly similar. Very similar. Very good. Very good. So, the first recording that we're going to play for you tonight is allegedly that of Gennady Mikhailov. Now, when they recorded this is what's really creepy about this. When they recorded this, the capsule was heading for the moon, according to Dante. And what's interesting is that when the spaceship shot up into space, the heartbeat of the Russian cosmonaut was so loud that it sounds like somebody is kicking the side of the spaceship. What you're about to hear is the sound of Gennady Mikhailov. And it's really quick, so we're going to hopefully you'll be able to hear it right off the bat. If not, we'll play it again, 11 seconds. You'll hear the sound of his heartbeat, and then you'll hear his last gasp. Let's play that, David. That's it. That's his heartbeat. That's how loud his heartbeat was.
But it didn't sound irregular.
Go ahead and get on the microphone.
But it didn't sound irregular or accelerated.
No, but it was loud enough that you could hear in the microphone the microphone that was in his suit could pick up that heartbeat.
Okay, my point is, wouldn't he have been somewhat excited thinking about, you know...
Well, it is kind of fast when you hear it, though. I mean,
It just sounded strong, but not accelerated.
Well, that's what they got. That's what they got. And that's what they say they got. In fact, this has finally been released. So, you don't think it sounded all that accelerated?
That kind of missed me a little.
Well, I think though that, you know, something that, it's, when I first played it, I'm like going, yeah, right. But then I was thinking to myself, they actually had a surgeon say, you could hear the heart pumping louder. And it sounds like it's moving kind of fast. And it was so loud that they could hear it in the microphone. I don't know. It just seems to me that it was pumping out. It's just so fast.
I admit that it sounded incredibly extra strong.
Right.
I'm just saying it didn't sound awfully accelerated.
Right.
But maybe he really didn't expect to expire.
Yeah, I don't think he expected to die. But that was the last thing. That was his heartbeat. That was heart racing or beating, and then his last gasp.
Yes.
That's what you heard. So, the next thing that we're about to hear. Yes, go ahead. Go on, Mike.
What year was that?
I'm not too sure. Probably 1960, 61. You bet. Now, the most famous recording they have, and this is a very difficult recording, but I'll tell you about it. It's of a woman cosmonaut. Her name is Lyudmila Sarkovna. And what you're hearing is she's coming down, she's going into re-entry. And you're hearing her kind of talking normally as if nothing's going on. And then all of a sudden you hear her say, and I had this translated, she says something about, she says, Lovicia flamas, which means in Russian, I see flames, I'm hot, I'm burning, I can't breathe. You can hear in this recording, you're going to be able to hear the voice, you're going to be able to hear how she sounds pretty calm, and then you'll start hearing her saying, I see flames, I see flames. Just listen for the words. It's hard to hear because this is like back in the 1960s. It's something like Lovicia flamas. Go ahead. Bring it up a little more. I see flames, I'm burning up, I'm hot. You can't breathe. So she's saying in Russian, yes. 3 days later, the TASS news agency, the Soviet press agency, announced the return to Earth of a large unmanned satellite which burned up upon re-entering the atmosphere. The satellite was the size of a city bus. Its launch had not been previously disclosed and its purpose was unknown. However, what you heard was the reality of a young woman cosmonaut burning up as she came in to re-entry here upon the Earth. Large parts of the early Soviet space program remain unknown to this day. Information was destroyed, most of those involved have died or vanished. Some historians have recently solved some of the mysteries surrounding the early cosmonauts. The rumors are that floating out in space are the bodies of dead cosmonauts, some burned beyond recognition and others are well preserved and are floating around, frozen in time. The last thing I remember was being fired off in outer space and their last gasps being heard by the Cosmodrome. I think as I was reading this, I found it very creepy because, you know, this is something that, Here they want to expose America, though the United States really didn't have, as far as we know, astronauts dying as they were going to space. But the United States military were also involved in secret space projects of their own. Many of them classified, many of them leaked out to the general public. However, those that are leaked have been discredited as conspiracy theory or declared false. However, there are some stories that, while factual, seem hard to believe, and some are very dark and creepy. The atomic age and the space age met head on, and satanic ritualistic magic accompanied the United States space program. Now, we have talked about, here on this stage, we have talked about Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons, we've talked about him. He was one of the founders of the Experimental Rocket Research Group at Caltech, and the group's 7-acre Arroyo Seco testing facility would eventually become Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, NASA's Rocket Design Center. Now, Werner von Braun claimed that it was the self-taught Parsons, not himself, who was the true father of the American space program for his contribution to the development of solid rocket fuel. Now, although Parsons had been memorialized with a statue at JPL that has a crater on the dark side of the moon named in his honor, his story remains shrouded in mystery. Parsons was an avid practitioner of the occult sciences, and for several years, Aleister Crowley's hand-picked leader with the U.S. branch of the Ordo Templi Orientis and the Southern California-based Agape Lodge. We've talked about it before. It was reported that Jack Parsons had a sex magic ritual called the Babylon Working. He had a sex magic partner in the OTO. Her name was Marjorie Cameron. Now, while she was staying with a friend named Reynardo Droops in Hollywood, Marjorie confessed that she had been part of the Babylon Working rituals, and they were performed by Jack Parsons. She said that also those who were in attendance and performing these rituals were Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, Aleister Crowley, and an unnamed Manhattan Project scientist based at the Los Alamos Atomic Bomb Research Unit headed by Robert Oppenheimer. Very, very scary. They were trying to bring about the moonchild. The truth is that there are several stories of what this is all about. We've talked about them before. We talked about trying to open up a gate to bring in some alien being or strangeness, but what was really going on is there were a number of things happening with the Babylon Working. One in particular was to impregnate Marjorie Cameron with a child that would be born dead. The child would be ritually brought back to life as a living golem. The birthing ritual had to be in private area where Cameron was told that she could not scream or have any drugs to give birth to the child. Does this sound familiar to anyone?
Scientology.
Very good. Sounds a lot like Katie Holmes, doesn't it? Kind of creepy when you think about it. American author Michael Hoffman, in his book Secret Societies and Secret Warfare, speculates that the golem fetus was taken by government officials out of Marjorie Cameron and may have been placed inside a giant 25-foot long, 12-foot in diameter canister at the atomic test site. This mysterious canister was nicknamed Jumbo. It was made out of solid lead and cement. Now, it is conceivable that the fetus was placed in the center of the canister and irradiated with the blast of the world's first atomic bomb, thus infusing the demon child with the demonic force of atomic fire. Hoffman writes that Parsons believed that the child lived through the blast, was female, and that it became the embodiment of the moon child. Now, there are also others who are OTO aficionados who say, well, she was only born on the astral plane. And this is probably the more logical, believable thing, but there are a lot of people who say that actually Parsons claimed that that's what it was, a ritual that they did. They took the fetus, they put it in a canister and blew it up with the atomic bomb, and that what's going on is that she lives today, but of course rituals with all this weird hocus pocus shit isn't all that happened on the moon. In fact, there was a directed Masonic ritual that happened when they landed on the moon. There was a guy by the name of Kenneth S. Kleinecht, who was a 33-degree Mason, and with the help of the astronauts directed this Masonic ritual on the moon, and they also dedicated a lodge on the moon. It was a Masonic lodge as well. And this, of course, was not seen on television because that was a part of the secret rituals of NASA. Kind of creepy when you think about it, but that's what they did. It's well known that they did that. Now, Robert Graves, who's a well-known poet, he's also a mythologist and philosopher, said that the most blasphemous thing that has ever happened was what men did when they landed on the moon. There was a definite fear that the former Nazis that ran NASA were taking $40 billion of taxpayers' money for a project that was mired in mystery. Military whistleblowers claim that a lot of the money that was used to fortify the military-industrial complex was actually fronted by NASA. Other claims are that many of the moon missions we witnessed on television were faked, and that we also had a clandestine space program where the Air Force was secretly carrying out classified missions in space without the public's knowledge. This would explain why the moon trips look so fake and phony, and they were staged in a studio, and that there's also evidence to show that perhaps we did go to the moon, because they say they have moon rocks, and they have some pictures that say, you can't fake these. There are a lot of other fake images as well. So the idea would be that simultaneously, while our astronauts were high-fiving each other and playing golf on a soundstage at Area 51, we were really jumping around on the moon looking for other things. It was actually something I read back in 2002, that back in the 60s there was about $2.3 billion that was unaccounted for, and nobody knows where it was going and where it went. Some people say it went to the clandestine space program. Now, here's something that you need to know about. And this is where it gets kind of creepy and weird. There's a man on the internet right now who claims to be an astronaut. He claims to be William Rutledge, and he began posting videos on YouTube. The videos were alleged to be of a secret manned mission to the moon. They called it Apollo 20. They called it Apollo 20. Now, for those of you that don't know, there is no Apollo 20. Apollo moon mission stopped at 17. However, there's an Italian reporter by the name of Luca Scattamburlo, an Italian, he's a journalist, who tells a story about how Rutledge gave an email interview in which he said he was a commander of Apollo 20. Rutledge said that he has been a contract test pilot for the U.S. Air Force prior to Apollo 20. He claimed that he commanded a joint U.S.S.R mission to the moon in 1976. Aboard Apollo 20, they was supposedly going there to do some reconnaissance. They shot out of Vandenberg Air Force Base secretly, and the purpose was, of course, to explore ruins and photograph some of these ruins off the moon. Now, previous Apollo missions, Apollo 15 and Apollo 17, allegedly took photos of some strange things that were on the moon, and then they wanted to go and investigate these things. NASA officially ended the Apollo program during Apollo 17. Now, that was the last flight to the moon by Apollo, officially. 2 more missions had already been paid for. The spacecraft had already been built, the crews had already been trained, but NASA suddenly announced that they were ending the Apollo missions, and no one knew why. They just ended them. But there was also, though, the joint mission that they did with Russia. After the end of the Apollo moon missions, Apollo 17 was the final, of course, there was one more official flight of an Apollo spacecraft. This was when American astronauts linked up with a U.S.S.R. spacecraft for the Apollo-Soyuz test project. Now, it wasn't called Apollo 18, but a lot of people in the European news called it Apollo 18. So actually, it was kind of an Apollo 18 joint mission with Russia, Apollo-Soyuz. Go ahead and get on the microphone if you want to talk to me. That's how it works.
Were we as the public notified of this mission at all? And if we were, what was it called to us?
No, nobody was notified of Apollo 20. That's the thing, is it was a secret project of their dual space program. Rutledge says that the Air Force had their own space program. NASA was the civilian aspect of the space program. We had an Air Force version that was a different, I mean, they were working on something called, what was it called, Operation New Horizon. That was in the 1950s, where they wanted to colonize the moon. You guys can look all this up, I'm not making it up. They actually wanted to colonize the moon, and they were looking at the moon for artifacts, and the 3 missions that NASA allegedly did not carry out, allegedly by what Rutledge's own account said, they did carry them out, and they were for the sole purpose of recovering fossils from the moon, also looking over certain temples and structures, and discovering a spacecraft on the moon that had occupants in it.
Okay, my question is, while this was going on, what did they use to keep us pacified?
No idea. But you know what?
It
Here's
must
the
have
deal.
been something, because I remember something as a youth, but it's, and but during that time, but it's not what you speak of.
Well, we had Apollo Soyuz, and then like, yeah, that's what this is. That's what you're looking at right there. The logo that you're looking at is the Apollo Soyuz mission. It's the duel between Russia and the United States. So Apollo Soyuz was going on at the time. And here's the deal. I've heard so many people on the internet say, well, you can't hide a Saturn V rocket. I mean, shooting it off from Vandenberg.
Yes, you can.
You bet you can. You bet you can. Russians were hiding their rockets the whole time, and it took 2 Italians to figure out that they were firing men up there to die.
Yeah, that's all I was going to say is that they could have secret blasts going from a number of different places, including islands in the Pacific.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you for that. Thank you. Give him a hand for that because it's true. You know, where do you sit and I mean, how many people actually flip to Channel 21 and watch the shuttle itineraries that goes by? Only geeks and nerds do that. And even then, they're the smallest of the geeks and nerds. All the other ones want to play their 20-sided dice games. You know, I'd rather do that than watch the fucking shuttle accounts and shit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did want to point out that one of the strongest arguments against anyone ever going to the moon is the Van Allen belts.
Right.
And the fact that we have blown, back in the 50s, early 60s, we actually blew up atomic bombs in outer space around that have created tremendously radioactive zones.
There was actually a moment, I can't remember the name of I did write about it once. There was a program where they actually wanted to detonate an atomic bomb on the moon so they could show the Russians that we had power to do that. So yeah, we were tinkering with the moon in a lot of ways. I think though that eventually with the secret space program going on with the Air Force, we eventually did go to the moon, we landed on the moon, and then we actually did so because we had some interest in the moon dealing with these alien artifacts and dealing with the investigations of these alien artifacts. So, if the claims of Rutledge are true, if William Rutledge is telling the truth, and if these videos are genuine, then what we have is a remarkable story of a secret mission to the moon, the discovery of ruins, a mile-long spacecraft, actually 2 miles if you really want to get technical, and the recovery of dead alien astronauts. What you are seeing is you're seeing the insignia from the joint Russian and American space program. These are actual, authentic, and they were presented by William Rutledge. Rutledge was, according to what he claims, he was involved with the joint Russian and American space projects, including the one where they went and looked into the possibility of aliens on the moon. Now, this is the alien autopsy. Unlike the alien autopsy, tonight we're going to be showing you some bodies, we're going to be showing you some really scary things. Unlike the alien autopsy, there's a lot of truth and a lot of uncanny reality behind this. For those of you that don't know, the guy who did Max Headroom, how many people remember Max Headroom? By applause. The guy who created Max Headroom, John Humphreys, was the guy who created the alien for the alien autopsy. But what's really strange about the alien autopsy is that when they cut up the body, they were doing it in Masonic fashion. They used Masonic cuts. So when everybody was gathered around their TV on Fox News, they were watching them cut up an alien dummy, in some ritualistic way, and no one knew why. So it was kind of like part hoax, but there was a lot of reason for this hoax. And like it or not, people, the alien autopsy, no matter what you think of it, whether it be fake or real, and even though they said it's fake, the image of an alien being carved up on national television is in your subconscious. You have seen the ritual take place on national television. Go ahead.
Did the special effects guy ever explain why he was using Masonic?
He was no, he didn't say anything about it. He just said he was privately told to shoot this. It was shot in a soundstage in Camden, which is in northern England, and north of London, actually. And that's all he said.
No idea who backed him on this.
Ray Santilli. Ray Santilli. And some guy whose his name was Volker Spielberg, I believe. So there's something to think about. So, first of all, like I said, unlike the alien autopsy, the perpetrators are not afraid to show their faces. Here's Alexei Leonov, former Soviet cosmonaut with American-Soviet flags, Apollo Soyuz test project insignia. He allegedly was involved with the rescue and exploration in these missions. Also, here is a picture of William Rutledge on what they call the Phoenix lunar module. That's taken from footage. That's him there. His name is William Rutledge, and there he is holding a camera right there for everyone to see. So in the alien autopsy, though, you didn't see any faces. You saw them all covered up. You saw them covering up anything. These guys are showing their faces and admitting that they're a part of this. Here now are the astronauts being loaded into a capsule by NASA officials and American Rockwell Corporation engineers. Their faces are accounted for also in this video, so no one is hiding their faces here. They got their backs turned here, but you get to see them loading the astronauts into the capsules. Here are the mission insignia on the cockpit doors. This is Apollo 20. You notice that there's like two ships lifting a bigger ship off of the moon, and you have the Russian and the American flags together, which is interesting. Also, this is supposedly a picture of the rocket lifting off from Vandenberg Air Force Base. So, a lot of people are saying this is hoaxed, but don't know. It looks pretty real to me, but they say it's hoaxed. And the videos are online. It's hard to find them, though. I kept these pictures as it was developing. It's hard to find these because people keep taking them down, because I'll tell you about it later as to why. Here are the interior shots of the lunar module that, according to the video, are in there. Now check out the shots of the lunar module. There are a lot of people who want to prove this to be a hoax. They're dying to, but guess what? Those are actual photos of the lunar module. They actually match the schematics and the prints of NASA. So if this is a fake, it's a goddamn good fake. They've matched them up, and they're like going, how the hell did they get in and get shots of the limb? Unless there were real astronauts on that ship and they were taking shots of the limb. Now, here we get into the cool stuff. What you're looking at here are study photos from the Apollo 15 and 17 missions showing what appears to be a large cylindrical anomaly in a crater. The mission, according to Rutledge, was to explore this anomaly. The size of this strange object was a little over 2 miles in length. Just to give you a little bit of a perspective, here we go. The object was allegedly, it was slightly northeast of the Lucky, Del Porte, and the Isak craters. If you see, you can barely see the markings. These are their photos. We have about, it's 3,370 meters by 500 meters. And so you take a look at the Queen Mary, the size of the Queen Mary compared to what that ship is, and the Eiffel Tower compared to height. So there you have the so-called alien spacecraft there in the moon that they were looking at, that they were trying to discover. This has never been before seen, so you're seeing it right here at the Ground Zero Lounge. We are breaking the story right here, okay? There's a lot of stuff on the internet about this, but we're giving you the detailed story because this is out of Italy. Italy is reporting this, okay? So, there you go. The spacecraft sitting there in the middle of the crater. This was taken with Apollo 15 and Apollo 17. Next shot. Watch this. We're going to zoom in on this just to see what it looks like. We had some fun with this to zoom in. Zoom in with it. Boom. Boom. It looks like a joint, doesn't it? A big joint in space. Anyway. This is the close-up. This is the close-up. Now, you either can believe it or disbelieve it, right? But this is what they were trying. This is what they claim to have been investigating: is this ship. William Rutledge says that this is why they went to the moon again with the Apollo 20. Now, keep in mind that all this information had skeptics scrambling, most seeing inconsistencies and others wondering how all of this could have been done. When these images first surfaced, there was a consensus that all the footage was just an elaborate hoax. Many believed that all of it was faked, and some of it was. However, Rutledge claims that the faked footage was not his, that someone was trying to set up this information. It was all going to go down as one big joke. That was until Rutledge produced video footage of what appears to be dead pilots that were taken from the so-called alien craft and placed in the lunar lander. One of the pilots, a female, was codenamed Mona Lisa. Now, due to the graphic nature of the following slides, we ask if you're sensitive to the subject of death and scenes that show human and or possible alien decay. We ask that you step into the limbo lounge so you won't be affected by this, because these are very graphic shots of what we're about to show you. Now, In fact, they are so graphic and they are so intense that we have invited tonight to aid me in describing what we're about to see a mortician. Her name is Natasha Charda. I would expect you to give her a big hand for coming out here and helping us tonight with the Mona Lisa pictures. Just right here, Natasha, you're fine. Thank you for coming out tonight. Let's see if we can get the mic right on you so we can hear you fine. Just get right on it because it's hard to hear people. So, there we go.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, get right on it.
Okay.
There you go. Okay. So, is everybody ready to see the pictures of Mona Lisa? Woo! Yeah? I applaud? Okay. So here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the picture of the EBE codenamed Mona Lisa. There she is laying down. They have her laid down in state right there in the lunar module. This is what they claim. And what's interesting about this is that before I became a talk show host, I wanted to be a bereavement counselor at a mortuary. What they had you do is you did have to go through the training like most morticians do. You just wouldn't handle the bodies, but you were able to see how death looks. What concerned me about these pictures is that what you are seeing is, in my opinion, an actual dead body. And I had to call Natasha and have her come out, and she looked at it, and she was, what was your feelings when you first saw Mona Lisa?
My feeling was that
Get right on the microphone.
it definitely is a deceased entity, either human or alien-like, and that there's a lot of characteristics within the photos that state that that is not a fake, that it's not the work of a funeral director or a mortician, because the photo clearly doesn't demonstrate current embalming methods that most embalmers use today.
We're going to go to another slide. Here's another close-up of Mona Lisa, what she looks like. If you notice, now the eyes are what I notice, and usually when you look at when death sets in, there are certain things that happen to the eyes and the lips. Explain how the capillaries burst in certain areas of the eyes and the lips.
When someone dies, naturally, the minute you die, your body starts to break down. And one thing that you can notice in this photo is that there's a mark on the forehead. And there's also a lot of dark spots around the eyes, and that's common with dehydration. The body, as it starts to break down and it's been restored in some way, it's not uncommon for the eyes and the forehead to start to dehydrate. Oftentimes the lips can dehydrate as well, and that would clearly state some of the separation that you see on the mouth.
Right, let's get a little closer in. Here is more close-up of the eyes and the head of Mona Lisa. This is where you can see the detail. Now, you were telling me about how the eyes flatten out when you die. Tell me a little bit about how that happens when the eyes go back into the skull.
One of the first things that happens within death is usually the brain, the eyes, large intestine, also the uterus in a female. They're one of the first organs that begin to break down the quickest. And so it's not uncommon for the eyes to flatten out. So what a lot of times morticians do is they actually will put an eye cap on over the eye in order to keep the eye closed and to also give the eye back some shape.
So there you go. If you look carefully, you can see that this is a close-up, an extreme close-up of the eye of Mona Lisa. And you can see that the capillaries below the eye have burst, like in dehydration that happens during the decay process of death. Now, if the body was in minus 454 degrees below zero, or if it was in an area where there was no atmosphere or bacteria to harm it, you would see this type of slow decomposition of the body. Go ahead.
First of all, I've got no idea how an actual dead body looks. So
well, we're explaining to you. You're looking at one right now.
But I was watching the alien autopsy thing. We've substantiated that this was a hoax, obviously.
Sure.
Now, what I'm saying is there were a lot of experts that came forth during the alien autopsy show and explained why this wasn't a fake, why this had to be real.
No, the morticians came forward, if you remember, and they said the effects on the body were not congruent with what happens in decomposition. They said that. They did not come forward and say it was real. They said that and then people explained, well, we don't know how aliens react. What Natasha is trying to explain is that this body is reacting the way this body should be reacting as a real corpse.
So that's what I was looking for, is the substantial differences, is how this is different or more authentic than that original.
And we're explaining
And the other thing I wanted to point out is, obviously, this looks nothing like the standard way an alien is presented.
No, and that's what makes it more interesting, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Okay. I just want to let everybody know that
They came from the planet Earth many millennium ago, and are there preserved, and now we're finding them. They
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to be alien.
right, they don't have to be alien, they can be human.
Easily be from our planet.
One of the things that Natasha had brought up to me as she was looking over the pictures of Mona Lisa is the lips. Can you explain a little bit about what the lips, the way they look, what they mean to you?
What you notice on the lips is that you can see a lot of detail there. There's a lot of the shape and the natural lines in the lip, where in most deceased individuals, when the lips begin to separate, a mortician will take wax and they will actually shape the wax and fill in the gaps of where the lips have dehydrated, and it oftentimes does not look real. This is very detailed, and I can tell you that I've worked with a lot of different morticians who are extremely well crafted in cosmetic work, and I've never seen anything that was this well done before.
Let's take a look at the next shot. This is actual shots of bodies decomposing in the grave. What you see, if you look carefully on the left, you see how the mouth basically separates and goes into the cheekbone area, and that's how the decay begins. You see it also on this corpse, how the cheekbones, how the mouth separates, and how it goes into the cheekbones. You're seeing bodies pretty much preserved, as they call it, a saponification of the body, where the body literally turns to like a special type of wax. It's called funeral wax, or mortician's wax. That's what you're seeing with these bodies here. Just goes to show you that when we were looking at Mona Lisa's lips, they were beginning to do that. But it didn't go all the way into the decomposition mode because the bodies were being preserved in frozen temperatures. They were being kept preserved with no bacteria. So what we're seeing is, if this is a hoax, it's a very well-preserved hoax. Anything else, Natasha?
One thing that I would like to just state is, if you've ever looked at some of like the rituals of like the Incan and Mayan cultures, when they did some of their sacrifices, and they would take them up to the high mountain areas, a lot of those bodies were well preserved because they were in very cold climates, high altitudes, and bacteria was not able to grow. And the way that these bodies look, they were not preserved with current embalming methods. It definitely was the preservation of not being in any type of a wet climate. It had to have been dry, and an area where they were not able to receive bacteria to help with the decomposition process.
In fact, and she's right, because if you take a look at these two bodies, this body here, this little girl's been dead for 200 years. 200 years, and that body looks like she did the day she passed away. So it's because they kept her in such a condition, and the embalming methods were done so well that she didn't decompose. Now, we've seen this phenomenon before, and that is when you take a look at bodies, like, for example, Catholic nuns and Catholic people like priests and stuff, their bodies pretty much stay together, and they basically bring them out of the graves every 30 years to venerate them. What were you going to say?
I was just wondering if you had any more details on how that happened via like...
No idea. It's just that she didn't decompose.
Do we have a geographical idea of where this girl died or buried?
She was buried, I guess, in a cave somewhere where it was very dry and she didn't decompose all that
You know,
much.
if this is American or Russian?
It was in Italy, I believe.
Italy.
Yeah, these are all European graves.
Thank you.
You bet. So there you have it. You have this nun that's pretty much kept together, and this priest who's pretty much, you can see that, once again, the mouth decomposed, left the cheekbones intact, and kind of like what happened with Mona Lisa. And there she is again. Now keep in mind that she's laying near the console of the Lamb, and they're trying to figure out how they got a body like this, especially a body like Natasha has told us, next to a spacecraft like that, which makes you wonder. And this is where, Rutledge would say, okay, I'm fed up, I'm going to show you this. This is it's the final straw. Here are her chest, her torso. Now notice, she looks like, the breasts look like they don't look like skin. They look like they're kind of saponified or like soap. They basically turn into like this clayish type look. Bodies do that. They do that. They turn into a clayish type look. I mean, if you were to bury Grandma, you buried Grandma 60 or 25, 30 years ago, and the elements didn't get to Grandma, the embalming that has happened to her, she's pretty much kept intact. Am I correct?
For the most part, it really depends on the climate. Once again, even with embalming, it does not last forever. It really depends on the climate. It still has to keep dry. But if you'll notice in a lot of different types of cases where police will discover bodies who have died in a shallow grave, one of the ways that they're able to tell how long that body had been there is by what they call like the grave wax. So the actual fat of the decedent seeps through the ground, and that's how they're able to tell exactly how long that body was there, because they're able to calculate the time that the wax actually broke down from the body into the ground.
Here's also a picture of her skin close up, just to show you how the skin had broken in some areas due to the dehydration. That's another example of how that's done. Now, we're going to show you the other occupant. Just some quick shots of the other occupant. There was another occupant with her. There you are. Now, they don't know what these things are on the face. They think it was some sort of control mechanism. This is a male, and they thought it was the way they basically controlled the ship. They must have slept in their long journeys, and then they put these they don't know what they were, some sort of controls on the eyes and the mouth, and then there's this area plug in the middle of the head where they supposedly, and you can see that it was frozen to them because they were in that frozen area there on the spaceship. And there's the shot of how it looked. And there's nothing, they only browsed over this one for a short period of time. But Mona Lisa, they spent a lot more time on when they were doing the video. Now, as I was preparing this show, I'd like to thank Natasha. Thank you, Natasha. Give her a big hand for the explanation. Now, as we were preparing this show tonight, there was some news that came out of Italy that I find most interesting about Luca Santamburlo. Luca Santamburlo has decided that since he's been threatened and his life has been threatened, he will no longer report this story. Now, those are her pictures.
I don't know the details again, but they actually had followed me. There were about 100 vehicles in the convoy. And what happened was they came up behind me. I saw them in my rearview mirror. It said convoy ahead. That was what was in my rearview mirror. The first truck freaked me out. That was what I saw first. And then I called him and said, "Do you want pictures?" She's like, "Yes." So that's the first truck that followed me. And what freaked me out was there were 3 or 4 men on each one of these trucks. And they're not tanks. They're Humvee tank trucks. I don't even know what they're called, but each one of these vehicles had 4 or 5 guys in the rain. It was slashing rain. They were on top. They were completely covered. They had machine guns, a couple of them, which kind of freaked me out. And there was a line of probably 100 or 150 trucks. So I took the pictures. I will attest to it. It was my camera. I've got them on my cell phone. These are raw, uncut pictures. If you want to see the cell phone, I got them. So there you go, Clyde.
Thank you so much, Delana. Give her a big hand. His relatives were threatened. He was threatened, and he has abandoned this story, and he says that he will eventually tell the whole story in an essay called American Armageddon. Now, why is he going to call it American Armageddon? That's the secret. That's the secret as to why. What does this mean? What does this body mean for Americans? Why is it that it's such a secret, and why is it that he decided to bail out at the last minute? Well, I have an idea. We're going to go back to that little report we call Iron Mountain. Everything's going by the book, because when you consider the point-by-point plan that they demonstrated with the Iron Mountain report, the report was first proposed during the Johnson administration, said it would take 40 years to implement. Here are the things that they were going to do to us before they were to change the government and change the world. They were going to declare an environmental threat, an economic meltdown, government failures, and a space menace or an extraterrestrial threat. We've already experienced the environmental, the economic meltdown. Government failures are to come. And then they will announce to the world that perhaps there is an alien threat or an extraterrestrial menace that we have to fight off. This is the next step. And believe me, this has been going according to plan. We've talked about here at the Ground Zero Lounge, and we always ask the question, is all this stuff by design? If this is fake, then why was this fake made, and why did they go to all the trouble to put a corpse on the LEM in order to prove a point? Especially one that looks very dead and very well preserved. Well, there's also reports out of Australia and the United States. There's a woman named Blossom Goodchild and Daniel Brinkley, both psychics, who say that there's going to be a mass UFO sighting on October the 14th. Now, what is that all about? I don't know. I don't know if it's true. I don't know what's going to happen. But they made the announcement that it's going to happen. And you know what? With all the shit going down, it makes me wonder if they're going to unleash this on the public with all the other stuff. I mean, remember we talked about, prior to October 1st, that the Homeland Brigades are now on call. They're now on the ballot. I have people telling me, now get a load of this. The brigades are out. I said they'd be out by October 1st. I have people laughing at me saying, well, I haven't seen any soldiers. I haven't seen any tanks. I haven't seen any jeeps. Well, guess what I have, people? I have a friend of mine who was on her way home from Washington State, and she caught in a rearview mirror and passing her with her cell phone the following photographs. There she is with a rearview mirror holding up her cell phone. There's a Jeep right behind her, if you notice. A tank goes zooming by her while she's on the road. And of course she gets the last aftermath of it from behind by shooting in front of her windshield. Yeah, holy crap. I just heard that in the audience. What do you think of that? Give Delana a big hand, please, for those pictures. Delana runs the IdeoCast website. She called me and said, Clyde, you're not going to believe what I just snapped. I just snapped a Jeep in my rearview mirror, a tank, and another vehicle going by. She says the troops are here. She says she saw them and that they've been deployed. Go ahead.
Could you show the second picture again, please?
Let's see. Hold on. It's just a tank. Gotta go through the whole segment again. Here's the Jeep following her from behind. The Jeep's following her from behind. Is it going to switch, or did I screw it up? Hold on. I can't get back to that picture, I don't think.
Hey guys, I'm Delana.
Oh, hello, Delana.
Hi.
Thank you for coming for those pictures. Those are exclusive to the Ground Zero Lounge. Thank you, Delana, for those pictures. Those are amazing pictures. Now, we take a look at the news and what's going on with the news. They're saying now that the world banks are falling apart. No. They're saying that the economy is falling apart. Yeah, you can say no all you want, but it's going to make it hard for you to basically cash your checks if your banks aren't working. And you need to pay attention to that. You can laugh all you want, but this shit's going down, and we've been talking about it, and people are going to go, oh, this is America, we'll pull out of this. Fuck you, we're not pulling out of it. Your country's heading for a socialist creep. Get ready for it. It's going to happen. Go ahead quickly, and then we want Alice to do some summary. Go ahead.
I was just going to say,
if that vehicle is what it looks like, that's a Striker. It's a type of military vehicle. It's usually not tracked. It has 3 large wheels on each side. It's used as sort of an enforcement vehicle in convoys in Iraq. And as a note, as a possible explanation, there's a Striker brigade deploying out of Fort Lewis in the next couple weeks or a couple months. So they were probably en route between servicing, getting it ready to send over, maybe to just be repainted.
Right, okay. Go ahead, Jeff, quickly. We've got to hurry through this because we're going to wrap up with the karaoke bell people.
I'll be as quick as I can. I wanted to talk about martial law, panic.
Can you guys keep it down a little bit? I can't hear him.
And naked short selling.
This is important.
I forgot if we discussed last week, Brad Sherman said, he's a Congress creator in California, he said he had people approach him saying, if you do not pass the bailout, there's going to be martial law, and not parliamentary martial law, but real martial law.
Right.
Something he pointed out in another video, different than the most popular one on Dick. Anyway, normally in a time of crisis like this, the President of the United States would be trying to calm us. Remember FDR, we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Right.
What is our current president doing? He's escalating the panic.
Right, he is.
He is saying, if we don't have this bailout, the economy is going to collapse.
And our candidates are using
panic.
our candidates are using it as a political tool to basically make each other look bad. And they both voted for it, by the way.
Anyways, in this other video, Brad Sherman said he thinks they're trying to provoke us into declaring martial law. Another video that I saw recently was, I think her name is Naomi Wolf.
Right.
Anyways, look her up. And then something briefly I wanted to discuss was naked short selling. If you do not know what naked short selling is, look it up. Basically what it is people selling stocks that they do not own.
Right.
Yes, apparently this is a common practice on Wall Street these days. And it doesn't even make a blip on the radar of the Securities and Exchange Commission unless you do not provide the stocks within 8 days of when you promise to sell it.
Okay.
Washington Mutual, which everyone knows, well, anyone who's been paying attention knows went bankrupt. 9 million shares of Washington Mutual stock fell under the failed to deliver, which is to say someone sold shares of Washington Mutual which they did not own and was not able to provide those stocks within 8 days.
So it sounds like some phantom's hijacking the economy. We don't know who these people are. And as I said before, we need to arrest these people, and we need to make sure. And you know what? Your America's gone. So if you go and vote, it's not going to matter. This shit's going to continue to go on. Obama or be damned. It's not going to change a goddamn thing.
Well, we can change it.
Oh, good for you. We can change what? Oh, that's good to hear. Sing Heil to you too. Okay. Let's get Alex up here because Alex want to do a summary.
Just briefly, yeah, whether it's a phantom or whether it's just people trying to make money, what matters is people are doing illegal stuff that's clearly illegal, and the SEC is not prosecuting them.
That's right, they're not. Give him a hand for that. They're not prosecuting the criminals. And we are placating the enablers by believing in this bullshit mythology. We can change the world. Yeah, let's see how you change the world with mace in your face. Go ahead.
Alex asked me to come up before he did and simply mentioned that 3 weeks ago I was on this stage and I mentioned about halfpasthuman.com. October 7th at 2:10 Pacific time is their prediction for an event, and that could be 2-3 days either side of it. But basically what these guys have done, and they've been doing for 10 years through computers, is sampling all the language on the internet, which they claim is an insight into the collective unconsciousness of mankind.
Exactly.
And what they're saying is that around that date, something will happen that's so dramatic that everyone is going to be holding their breaths for the next 4 months to see what happens.
Alex Answer, you have some closing thoughts, and then I'm going to do some closing thoughts, and we'll have karaoke from hell up here. I'm sure that's what we want to come for. I mean, we're giving you information here.
Yeah, exactly. Party like it's 1929.
Yeah, we all came to see you. Good night.
1929. Everything's fine. It's 1929. So that was one out of 4 predictions that I found last night indicating October 7th, 2008. He just mentioned Cliff and Igor from halfpasthuman.com. Now, we all know people have been making predictions for a long, long time. It gets very difficult to decipher, is this true or is this something valid? But when you find 2 other people, Dr. Deagle, anybody ever heard of Dr. Deagle? Dr. Deagle went on Project Camelot 2 days ago, talking about a vision he had of October 7th, 2008, which is tomorrow, an economic crash and a false flag attack in the United States. He was also matched by Rebecca Jernigan. JourneysWithRebecca.com is her website. This is a psychic clairvoyant who's been doing a radio show for a number of years. You got to think about this, guys. All these different people have put their reputation on the line saying something is going to happen tomorrow. That's 3 people, 3 groups. You have halfpasthuman.com, you got Rebecca, you got Dr. Deagle. Anybody ever heard of Terrence McKenna? Anybody? Terrence McKenna.
I heard of Terrence McKenna.
Anybody ever heard of McKenna? Terrence McKenna invented a software program called Time Wave Zero before he passed on several years ago. And it's really about matching the Chinese fortune-telling system known as I Ching with a software program looking at the Mayan calendar of 2012. And in the run of 2012, in his software program, there's a huge drop also on October 7th tomorrow, 2008. So what's going on in the news? Well, I'll tell you. The Chinese says the United States gets no more money, no more loans. They just bailed out the European banks. The European banks also, in the meantime, are being bailed out by U.S. taxpayers, and they're hoarding gold. So we are moving very closely to that point where perhaps our ATMs do not work. And I think, Clyde, that story about the brigades that has spent 36 months in Iraq, off and on over 5 years, they're also known as the Raiders. They may be here in preparation for something that may be happening in the next couple of days.
And that's where those black helicopters report too over the city. Go ahead, Delana.
I just wanted to say thank you for backing that up, because Alex, really, that helped a lot, but have to move on to karaoke.
Yeah, we will. We're going to go on to karaoke quickly. I just want to say one thing, and that is, Ronald Reagan once said to the United Nations, he says, our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside of this world. Right now, we need an alien threat more than anything else to take our minds off of this stuff. If they stage one, then you'll know that it's fake. You'll know whether it's real. You'll know. But you know what? They're able to simulate things now to where everything I talked about tonight could very well be a hoax, but it most certainly is a goddamn good one. They've done it before. They'll do it again, and they'll do everything in their power to retain power and keep you pretty much enslaved. People, you gotta stop thinking it's gonna work itself out. It eventually works itself out when the people get so goddamn fed up that they fight against the power. I'm not talking about voting for Obama or McCain. Those 2 people have enabled our government to continue the bullshit that they're doing to us. If you think that your vote is going to change this, you're wrong. I can tell you right now, this is how I compare it, and then I'm going to say goodnight. We're going to have karaoke from hell. You take Uncle Sam in his top hat, you bind him with ropes, you put a blindfold on his head. You take him, you sit him in a chair. You hand Republicans and Democrats guns, you give them bullets, and those bullets say on them, your vote. You put the bullet in the chamber, you lock, you load, you fire at Uncle Sam at the target that's on his chest, and the end result is the same. A dead Uncle Sam. My bullet will not hit that target. I'm Clyde Lewis, this is Ground Zero Lounge, good night.